What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I am Alex, and I am joined by a very special guest to continue this Lost Records just topic that we've been going over the last couple of days. In this one, I thought, okay, this would be a really good opportunity to talk about the future, whether it's Lost Records 2, whether it's just the future of Don't Nod. So I brought Adnan back. Of course, if you remember the heated Life is Strange back, which I thought was awesome, by the way. But we brought him back, and I think this is going to be a more kind of positive space. So firstly, man, thank you so much for joining. I know you very much like the game. Do you want to just first introduce yourself, but also what'd you think of it, just really quickly for those that maybe don't know?
Yeah, cool. And thank you for having me back on, Alex. It's always a pleasure catching up with you. Obviously, caught your stream as well, the Lost Records spoilercast. And I was like, where's my
Which was a
invite?
back and
But
forth kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, I'm Adnan. I run Play One versus World. I do a Lost Records podcast with my co-host Adam Evolt. So we've been doing that for a year now. It's just over a year. And then we also do a Strange Cast, which is our Life is Strange fan podcast. We've been doing that for about 4 years, and again with Adam as well. And I host other shows on there. One with my co-host Abby, where we do Fireside as well, and a couple other little bits as well. A lot of interviews, and yeah, that's mainly me. But yes, I've also played Lost Records, and that's why I'm here.
So I guess we can just start. Let's start kind of with Lost Records, and then we can go a little bit
Mm.
towards Don't Nod. So I'll just throw it to you. What did you think? Because I think we have to bring up the ending, right? So this is going to be more of like a spoiler type discussion. What did you think of the ending? Obviously, a lot of unanswered questions. I think purposely, right? So what did you think of it,
Mhm.
and where would you personally? I guess this is almost two things. Where would you want to take it, and where do you think they would take it, or if they're the exact same thing?
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about it. So only at the moment I've played it once. So I'm currently like on playthrough 2, and I've said this to everyone, like, please don't jump on me if I get something wrong, because like Life is Strange had that benefit where we could talk about it for 10 years, and it's like
Right.
now you know everything. But the ending is really interesting. So I've seen a lot of the criticism and then also a lot of the praise as well. All fair and warranted in different and on different accounts as well. So like I can see it from both sides how people feel. The way the game ended, personally, I really enjoyed it. And maybe it's because I was looking at it differently. And my expectations, I've said to a couple of people, like, I never saw this as a Life is Strange spiritual successor. I kind of stopped calling it that
Yeah.
because it kind of reminds me more of Oxenfree and those kind of games. And it's completely different dynamics and what they're doing as well. Obviously, from the creators of Life is Strange, but it feels like that's the moniker to kind of amplify the marketing. But the way that the story tells and the way it ends, like I've always seen it as a coming of age story, and especially with Swan Holloway, and where she ends the game there, I think it's quite logical, like for the game to end at that rational point. And whether they choose to do a sequel or not, that's down to them. Whether it's a direct sequel or it's like a kind of like a side shifting sequel where the characters can appear in the other universes, i.e., like Life is Strange 2, which I know you love.
Yeah.
Um,
Love it.
but but like I think that that's a possibility, and I keep saying to my co-host, minute Adam, I keep saying like it reminds me of Jumanji a little bit. This where it's like where you have Jumanji, it's like the board or the game, depending on the remake, and anyone can be interacting with it. It's just there is a world there, and anyone can kind of get involved in it. So even like the abyss could be like a portal to open up to other people, where other people can meet it, interact with it, depending on how the game ends. And like I still have like a lot of theories about how it's ended. Like these characters could interact with other characters from different generations and whatnot. So the opportunities are open. One thing that I'm really kind of like annoyed at the minute, I don't like at the minute, and I've kind of noticed it's people using the term tape free and then also sequel baiting. And it's like one person said it, everyone's caught onto it and has just constantly used it with that.
Yeah.
And I get when you use a sequel bait comment because some games have done that. The Order 1886 was an example of that. And I would even say, here's my bingo card, Life is Strange Double Exposure, because like that Max Caulfield return, you kind of like,
Right. Right.
you could have just got rid of that and still made a sequel to it. And people will probably be like, oh, you're making a sequel to it, we never knew.
Yeah.
But I don't consider this sequel baiting because literally a month after they finished they revealed the game, they put a post out saying this has been greenlit for a series. So how can it be sequel baiting when it's setting itself up for whatever it's doing? And people are projecting, so they're saying it's definitively Swan. Maybe it's not. They might throw literally a left curve, and it's like all these characters are gone, or it might just be Cat that comes back. God only knows that maybe Swan's story is done because it was a coming of age story, or maybe not, depending on what you see in the game. It's pretty like wild, but yeah, a lot to be said.
Yeah. No, I agree with a lot of that. I think you know, I get what they were going for. I think the
Mm,
ending, like I can appreciate this idea of these girls getting back together and it kind of just ending that night. Like it all, and I think they did, I
mm,
think even maybe you covered it. in terms of like finding the quotes of like that was like their main goal, right? Was to tell that story of them meeting at the diner and just kind of going over everything. And that was kind of it, like literally it. And I think from that angle, I actually think they nailed that entirely. Even well, let me ask you, which end I didn't see your stuff. Which ending did you get? Did you get the good or bad? I got the bad.
Oh, what do you consider bad?
I don't mind it. You know, I think Swan, like I played Swan as a person who's very like internal and you know, like you said, coming of age and just the way they make Swan as a character, you know, she struggles to talk or she struggles to interact. So I kind of played her that way where it's like if something was moderately uncomfortable, I pulled back. And I really appreciate that, honestly. I think they, like I said, I think they do a lot of stuff in this game good. So I played it like that. So the end, as these, you know, Nora and Autumn, as they're bailing on me, I was like, you know what, that kind of makes sense. I didn't really honestly think of it as a negative, but I will say, I mean, in terms of then the ending, if you were to continue with Swan, but now because of the Abyss, which I guess we could talk about later, like who knows if it's, you know, what even universe or what timeline, because I think in the bad ending, I feel like it's kind of hard for Nora and Autumn to come back because they bailed on you. You know what I mean? They just are not interested in completing it. So what'd you get? Did you get the good?
Yeah, actually, I haven't actually mentioned. I think we mentioned in the spoiler cast, but I've been very cryptic since we finished it because I was obviously trying to get the spoiler cast and review done. But it's interesting, at least on your ending, before I start on mine, because I think when you even said like it's the bad ending and you did that, like I found it when I said it to my co-host Adam as well. He loved it because he was like, "There's a really cool idea that, you know, Swan goes into the forest, she sees all the girls playing the instruments, and it's amazing." And funnily enough, I always say, like, you know, if you end the game with Swan on her own, it's not necessarily a bad thing because Swan has always been an introvert, as you said. Like, she's always been on her own. Exactly. She comes back to it. And I even feel it with the end of the game, when you get to the forest, like when you go through it, it's like it literally mirrors the beginning of the game where Swan is on her own and journeying on that. So it is interesting take. I think when people like saying like, "Oh, I feel a bit let down," just play the game. There's so many endings, like you could get a different one in the next one. But mine finished with, so my main romance option was Kat, and then I got to the end. Autumn had bailed, so we opened the box. She bailed. I kept Nora, which was a surprise. I thought some things were going like all over the place.
Yeah.
And then we ended with going back to Nora's garage, and Nora plays "See You in Hell," and then the two girls are there as their young version. So it's Kat Kat is young, but Kat and Autumn is young, and they play "See You in Hell," and like Swan's leaning on her. And it's really quite a poignant scene. But even in that scene as well, I know that I think they do kiss as well, Swan and Nora, if they are love interests. So there's even more variations within that ending. So that's kind of the one that I had, and then obviously it leads to that final sequence, which is really interesting. But yeah, I was very happy with that because I kind of thought maybe my relationship would be with Autumn, but it kind of went left field. And I was hoping that all the girls would be there, but I was happy with how the game played out. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Detroit, when you can get to the end and all three characters are there if they're not there. And I thought that was kind of like quite cool how they played it out, and a lot of like touching moments. I had to watch my entire montage of terrible shooting for like 3 minutes before the credits played out because I was like,
yeah, they did that in tape one a couple of times where if she's showing it off and it's like I'm just the worst. I was the same. And it came across as very cringe because they are some of the worst recordings you'll ever see in your life. I did a terrible job. And she's so, remember, I think it's at the end of tape one where she's like, "Oh, look how awesome we are." And it's like, this is embarrassing that you're even, excited about that. No, honestly, man, I didn't even know that was an end. I saw I did it. They bailed and I was happy with it. Again, I thought it made sense, just like you were saying. And then I went online, I saw the good ending, and then I said, okay, that must only be it. So I didn't know, I know there's different things you can. I know like the Autumn stuff, you have to keep her calm. I think during the panic, which I thought that was a phenomenal, really, really freaking good scene. You have to keep her calm so that she doesn't go to Corey, and that's how you kind of stay with. So I was like, oh yeah, I screwed up multiple times.
There's one really phenomenal ending which I haven't got yet, and I've seen it. Unfortunately, some people are like, it's all over the internet, you can't avoid it. But there's one phenomenal one where they're all there, and it's like the way it plays out. It's like that's
the quote unquote good. And I had seen that directly after I did the bad. But I mean, well, like you said, when they're all playing it in the woods, I thought that was actually a freaking powerful. Like all their kind of like Force Ghost types. Like I thought that rocked. And I mean there's something kind of special to them playing it, in the bar and the diner. But I actually really, I think I almost prefer the forest one. Okay, so let me just ask you, do you think, I just flat out, would you want Swan specifically to return if they did a second one?
Ooh, see, it's hard because like it feels like her story's complete in certain senses, and then certain senses it's not. Because obviously, you have that little enticing cliffhanger and the way it sets up. But I'm not too sure. Like, if I wanted her to come back, I wouldn't mind her being like a side character or like someone who's like in the bigger picture of the universe, and you have like new characters and telling that. If
Yeah.
there is an ending that they can explore and they want to go for that going forward, and then go with Swan, that's fine by me. But I think like the always thing that I find as well with like these games, and especially with like Life is Strange and Lost Record specifically, and I don't know if you agree with me or not, but one thing I found very quickly with the online discourse was how many people were saying like the game revolves around Cat and it's all about Cat and Cat is like a driving mechanic for the game because ultimately the main character will always be Swan Holloway, and it's the same as the first Life is Strange with Max and Chloe. Chloe's an extension to her story. And even when you look at one of the interviews that Michel Coe and Jean-Luc Cano, who was the writer, did for this game, they asked who's your favorite character out of the four girls, and they both said obviously Swan. They're like Swan is our favorite, and then we obviously relate to the other ones, but that's the main character. So it would have to kind of be onto them if they can feel like they have more to tell with Swan's story. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But in kind of a nutshell, I don't really know if I want her to come back yet. And I think like how would you go about it? As you said, like, you know, Nora and Autumn, the relationships break away. The constants at the minute seem like that Cat is there and Swan's there. So unless you tell that story where it's two of them and you break off into a different story, then maybe. I'm fine with them doing anthologies. I hope that they do anthologies as well, where they tell stories with other characters, because it wouldn't be hard for them, to, for example, to replace these four girls with another four girls.
Yeah.
That could be interesting. Or two boys, two girls, or a non-binary, or whichever like variation you want. You might find something quite interesting in it. But yeah, I think it would be interesting to have her back, but I'm not overly sold on it. And again, I'm not following that sequel bait thing where it's like she needs to come back because we need to definitively explain it, because like ultimately there are a lot of things that have been explained, other things can be explained further down the line, which I think they will do.
Yeah.
But I don't know. How about yourself though?
Well, I agree with the main idea. I think Cat, I called Cat my favorite at the end of the day, which is ironic because in the tape one, as I said, I think she was just very uneven, whether it was acting or direction or whatever. But she became my favorite character by the end of it. But you are right. Cat is the thing that drives it. Going into tape two, you know, because of her condition, that like that's kind of the most important thing. So that's going. But you're right. Like Swan is. I think Swan's a good. Actually, again, like by the end of it, I think they all kind of rock. I think those because obviously it's building towards what ends up happening with the Abyss, right? But just some of the like the Autumn panic attack thing, or just some of the moments with Nora, kind of right after I guess the failed attempt of getting Cat from the house, like they got just a couple moments each in tape two that I think fully rounded out their characters that made them all good. I feel like because of the ending. I will maybe this is where I guess I would disagree or just like be forceful in this. I do think you'd have to do something with Swan, or you'd have to, I guess, explain, because this kind of goes to the next question. Like, what do you think actually happened in the ending? Like, what do you think the Abyss and Cat, or Cat, I guess, being there, right, as like the Force Ghost type thing, but Swan going to it. I guess what I'm trying to get at is if you made another game and you kind of just explained a little bit more about like what actually happens when you go into it, or how it has this possessive, type ability. You don't necessarily have to answer what happened with Swan, like where she is, but I think you need to give more context as to what the Abyss does, if that makes, what I mean? So I think you could have totally separate people, which kind of is actually, to your point, I didn't actually think of it. Oxenfree is a really good example, because you have all this supernatural stuff and you don't really know what's going on, and you have a chance to pull the characters back, but it's more of like how things function. Like that's more of like the point. So I'm actually in full agree. I just feel I need answers as to what it's actually capable of, like what the time travel stuff is and all that jazz. You don't actually have to answer where Swan goes, at the end of this game. But what did you? Well, I want your response to that. And also, I forgot to ask you. So, what happened with Cat in yours? Mine was actually, I think when I beat it, it was like 76-24, and mine was the 24 where they both fell in forcefully. She didn't give herself in. I actually kind of like her falling in. I wasn't a huge fan of the scene where she kind of just disappeared. I wasn't a big fan of that, but I actually liked my playthrough. So, what happened with all those characters to you?
Yeah. So on the point of the abyss, I think you're right as well. They do need to explain parts of it because that would make it. And I think you might see Michelle responded to Nicefield on Twitter saying like
I did.
it's a very yeah, it's a very fine juggling act because one thing I've just talked about as well with Adam on my podcast was Michel Cole has a very distinct style. So obviously David Lynch is a big influence, God rest his soul, and Stephen King is another one. And if you've ever read or watched some things of Stephen King that have been adapted or written, one example is 11/22/63, if you've ever heard of it.
Yeah.
In that book, for example, they never explain why this person can go back in time. He can go back in time, but they never explain why he can go back in time and where it's strategically placed. And that's what Michel does as well in his story as well. He might do something where he puts something and he won't fully explain it. It happens in the universe, but it doesn't have full details. So I think in the game as well, you see there's like clippings saying that the abyss has emerged and people are aware of it and it exists, and then eventually just disappears and it comes back. And it feels like some things will be explained, but I don't think the full concept of certain details will be explained where people like want to be fed everything. And I know that you're a big fan of this as well because you cover it a lot. In Scream, for example, you hear Billy Loomis and Stu Mocker say, for example, to Sydney, why do you have to have a motive? You don't always have to have a motive.
Right.
Why does Hannibal Lecter eat people? And then when Thomas Harris wrote the book, people found out why he eats people and they're like, oh, that's a bit disappointing. And it's like, actually, maybe we should have kept that hidden.
That's a good point.
Just for that, but I do think they will explain it. I think Michel's kind of like biting his lip on reaction on Twitter because I think he's really eager to kind of give you the forefront of what's going to happen. So I think that will happen. And also as well, for me, I think they explained enough for now, but I think that they will flesh this out going forward. And I think that's fair as a kind of anthology or whatever they're going to be doing with this series going forward. The second part of your question was about Kat, I believe it was. About
what happened to her and Corey to you when that whole thing went down.
Yeah, because I looked at the options afterwards when you said, and I was looking at some of them, and the one that makes me laugh is the one where it's like the girls like in synergy, like with the abyss, throw Corey, and I'm like, that's a wild one. It's like the lowest rank. How do you even get that?
Yeah.
Mine ended with both of them forcibly going in. I was like, oh god, it's like there they go. And I agree with you as well. I think that's the better one where Kat goes into the abyss. I don't think the one where she disappears on her free will is kind of as effective of her like basically going in with Corey, and that's more interesting. But yeah, that basically was mine. A lot of stuff was going on there. I was like, do I even go push the head?
And see that was a little, I'll tell you, okay, that was a little more because I think it has a scene that was really good, but that was when I talk about my review of it being like uneven. Some of the camera shots and just some of the way it was literally like it was too jumpy. It was like you knew as soon as they got there what was going to happen. Like Corey is like on the freaking edge and nobody is like making note of it. He's backing up closer and closer, and it's like, come on. But just some of the shots, I feel like they almost skip scenes. Like it felt actually a few times in tape too that like there should have been a scene and there wasn't. So it felt like a weird like jump from one thing. So it felt very disjointed, but I really like that outcome. Like I think that was a freaking, I love what it, and to what you were just saying too about the abyss. Like for me, because I agree, like I don't need every answer. You could look, Scream's a great, that was a good callback. But even Life is Strange too, right? Like not having to know. I never want to know. I think we both talked about this. Never want to know how Max the time stuff. That never needs to be explained. But I think I just want a little bit more of an explanation of like what it can act. I want like the power list, right? Like what can it actually do if time travel isn't, which it kind of has to be. But anything like that. I don't really need to know. Like I'm sure it can pop up kind of wherever. Like you can kind of, and that's something they don't even have to explain that. So for me, it's really they can do whatever they want with it. They can invent new things with it. I just want kind of what it is actually capable of doing. I think that would be enough for me in the future.
I think, and that's all fair as well. I think so far, and again, off my one playthrough, they have established it stays in that place because it reemerges in the same place. So the abyss is that one place. So it goes, it comes, and it goes and comes, and how it comes and goes is dependent on God only knows what factors are. It seems to be again hints at it, and I agree with like what you're saying as well. Like it feels like obviously budgets and constraints and certain things were getting to this game. Because I think I even saw Michel say like he'd love to have had more time with Dylan, like, but they had to we're going forward with it. And it felt like I really wanted to see more of Dylan in this episode.
She's a good character. That's a good character, I honestly believe.
Yeah, and I think they did really well with that. And I think that was kind of like a good dynamic that started to feed with both Kat and also the other characters. But yeah, you're fair with it as well, because I think like they will establish more with the abyss. I think that's the central theme for me at this game. I think it's not Swan and Kat. I think the Abyss is the central theme of the franchise, and I think that's what's going to start feeding into it. So we'll start getting more details about, I think, like as you said, whether it's time travel, whether it's this kind of mechanic, and it'll be enough where you feel like you know it, but you don't have to have the full detail. So just the same as Max has rewind powers because a trauma event has triggered that, and you kind of have an idea of the Abyss. So hopefully that is also played out. But I think, again, I'm kind of like being very open-minded to where Michel seems to be like, we actually have a lot in mind here. And it's like, I'm like, yeah, I kind of have that feeling with it. So yeah, and again, I think all the critiques are fine as well with what you're saying with like the cameras.
But you know, it's important because like this is how I always say it, and I have to always remind myself of it too. It's tough because, and you know the industry well, like you could do a lot of these types of games were everything back 10, 15 years ago, and they were fine. And I think actually we were less critical of them because they happen all the time, and you could turn out a sequel in 2 years and the sequel would be triple as good. Nowadays, you've got, and which kind of leads to this final part with like Don't Nod as a company, right? Nowadays, it's almost unfair. The first game is going to be uneven, but you've got to nail it. It's got to be almost this masterpiece because if it's not, you can't make. You know what I mean? Ironically, Banishers, I actually think was that. I actually think Banishers was that elite, like just foundationally great game, and they're never going to do that. But you know, I think do you kind of agree with that sentiment of like the pressure is more on for these games? I believe, you know, these type of 10-hour, you know, rough around the edges, but it's got something. It's got something that's special. We had that all the time, and like even the PS3 360 gen, and that went away.
Yeah,
you know.
No, I fully agree with you because the industry's so different now, and I think people kind of forget about that. So it's like even like I always say, and people always raise that, I always say that the first Life is Strange was a AAA game because people don't forget in 2015 AAA had a complete different definition for what it did now, and the minute Square Enix gets your arm attached to it, they do all the marketing, they give you external studios, they give you all the help that you need on Life is Strange, and they put the budget behind, they do all the other stuff, and you could argue it's maybe AA, and they kind of said that Life is Strange was this Sundance indie game, and it looks like that, but it was AAA because they had a publisher behind it. Again, that is now completely, now it would be a AA, even with Square Enix attached to it. So as you said, the budget constraints are like pretty crazy with it, and even my co-host Adam said, like, you know, it'd be great to see like Michel have like a budget of Ubisoft's with a game because he'd make an unreal story game, and in itself as well, like, you know, this is the kind of game that, for example, PlayStation would have made 20 years ago, and it's like they're just missing out on like doing these kind of games. They're now making AAA blockbusters, Jim Ryan's live service games, and you've seen the muck that has made Sony into the position it's in with PlayStation. The same with Phil Spencer on Xbox. So they do have a lot of constraints. They have a lot of demands, and to be honest as well, like I think that as long as this game's a moderate success and it's decent as well, that's also a good thing because it might sound crazy. I actually don't want this to be a sleeper hit for Don't Nod because that's the one thing that haunted Don't Nod, Square Enix, and Deck Nine for the entirety of Life is Strange. Life is Strange has forever been haunted by that black cloud that is the first Life is Strange game. And it's a fantastic game. It's a phenomenal game. But all they ever did was repeat, rinse formula. And for example, when Michel made Life is Strange 2, they literally, like, Square Enix were like, nah. After that, they're like, once it like didn't sell, it was like, no, we're never doing that again. It's like, but it was like, you know, a risk. It was different entry. It's something different. And I'm kind of happy that with this game, for example, they have included Life is Strange 2 thematic like elements and all the other stuff. So it feels like they haven't just abandoned everything. So I'm kind of happy that this is a moderate success, as you said. And I've seen your tweets where you say like there's potential here to make something even better. And I think whether you like this game or not, if you dislike it, however you feel, they have a lot of potential here to move forward. I don't really like some of the other criticisms where it's like, oh, it's boring and it's lazy and yada, yada, yada. It does feel fresh. It feels like something different. It's got limits with constraints of like budgets and stuff. But I also give it a little bit of lenience because it is an indie game. It is really an indie game. Like Don't Nod is stylizing this as an indie game. And if they can find the structure they need from this, then maybe there's an opportunity to kind of go forward with it. I think there's ways to improve this and quite easily like send this game into the next stratosphere. But let's see how it goes from them. But I think like as long as it's a decent success, then I think there's a lot of potential here.
Yeah, it's got its own identity, whether you like it or not. Like that's what it is, and I think we need more, you know, of that kind of stuff. And like you said, like the industry, Don't Nod's kind of one of very, very few, and it's why that it's kind of scary, you know, for Don't Nod's being because they just, you know, a lot of those companies either get bought up or they get shut down or, you know, whatever. So I guess final thing for this video, like what do you even, you know, Lost Records or even Lost Records aside, what do you really want to kind of see from Don't Nod over the next like couple years, whether it's, you know, just continuing new franchises or doubling down on this? What do you, you know, what do you want to see from them?
Yeah, that's such a I think that's such a difficult question and also like a good one because I know you cover a lot of franchises and even like Ubisoft and you
Yeah.
like cover like a large scope of that industry. And I saw your Last of Us video, which I laughed at a lot because I was like, yeah, we've now recovered the 10th remaster or something. Um, like
maybe they'll
Don't Nod,
remaster Lost Records next. Maybe that's the idea. I don't know. I
look,
don't know.
they'll remaster it, then put it on Switch
Well,
2 and
actually,
then they'll
let
remaster
me
it. And
throw
then
in a third possibility because you covered this, and that's where I got it from when I made that video. In that 2024 report, and I don't. I mean,
yeah,
you can correct me if I'm wrong. Is it the first time they said, or multiple times where they said about like they want to work with other franchises? Because I feel like maybe I'd seen that before, but I think I forgot about it. So I saw it and I was like, oh shoot. Because there's that option too, right? If somebody throws them a bone and like a Telltale's Walking Dead, like just somebody throws them a random franchise, right, for them to work on. I guess that's a third possibility, right, that they could start partnering, which is probably the way forward. I mean, you can tell me what you think. I think they might have to do that, right, with the industry economy and all that stuff.
No, you're completely right because like I think what's happened is they've reported that earnings, so it's the 2024 year results that they put, but they're also releasing the full thing on the 30th, so they give more insight into the data.
Yeah.
And they have said that they're going to work with other publishers before because so in 2023 they announced a reorganization project, so they were going to lay off 69 people and they scaled down different things. So they wrote down the assets for Banishers, they wrote down assets for Jusant, and then they put 2 production lines on halt. And then they said they were going to change 2 production lines to make it wider appeal.
Yeah.
And then I think after this union battle that they've just done and they concluded early this year, they re-announced the reorganization project, but in that they said this message where it's like we are happy to work with external publishers and existing IPs as well with our team. So again, they're now branching out with those opportunities, which I think would work out for them because like they have the talent there. So for example, you look at the Banishers team, you could move that onto another licensed IP and it would work dividends for them. So I think with them opening, I think they're not an anomaly. They are also in a bad position in terms of financially, but they're no different from like Ubisoft, for example, and the same with like Deck Nine and other studios. They're all feeling the brunt of the video game industry amid tariffs, amid the climate, amid rising costs. All the things are factoring into it. So that pre-COVID boom has gone. So like where everyone was in COVID, it was like, yeah, fantastic, we'll scale up. We're now having to like make the adjustments to it. So I think like they have currently 2 games in the production line, and apparently they're expanding the horizons of it. So it's not a niche one. It's more like, oh, we're actually going to make it to a wider scale audience. And I think in the press earnings as well, the earnings report, Oscar Gobert and the Don't Nod said there's like 6 pillars that they're focusing on. So they're restructuring on things. For me, like they need to make those 2 games like with publishers and get like a license out and get people to market the games and like push it. I think Don't Nod needs to upscale its own marketing team and get people in there, especially social media and like in terms of TikTok, in terms of those platforms, really exploit those because they have a big full and fun Life is Strange in the IPs. So I think like there's a realm of possibilities here. Like there's all kinds of opportunities. Like maybe 20 years, like maybe 15 years ago, I would love to have had like Sony acquire Don't Nod and then like make those really lovely, like majestic, single player games and whatnot. Obviously, I like my games being on all platforms, but maybe there is something there. I think like Don't Nod's market cap at the moment is like 9 million euros. It's like been obliterated. So they're like down to almost nothing. And they've got investors and they've got all kinds of things. So I think the company's going to lay off about 50 plus people and they're also going to be coming down to about 300 employees. But so they really need to focus on getting the big hitters. So if they can, for example, get Lost Records to be a steady success and it starts appearing in the earnings and you get earnings from the royalties from it, fantastic, because then it's one game that's been post-Vampire that's been a success and they can get some sustainability off it. And when you have a studio that's just open with Montreal, it took 4 years to make this game, but the next game won't be that because they've got everything set up so they can start making a conveyor belt with good games coming out of that. So I think they just need to adapt to their climate, and I think they're very well aware of that. And I think at the moment, Oscar Gobert is making the right decisions of being like, and he's the CEO and chairman, if you don't know, he's making the very the tough, brutal calls from the top, being like, this is the direction we need to go in, and we need to really upscale and open to a market. So I think there's a realm of possibilities, and I think even with like Lost Records, for example, whether this is to Games Pass or whether it's to PS Plus or whichever incentives you want to do, I think they need to take as many options as they can to kind of get people's eyes on it. Because if, for example, you make a Lost Records fan from PS Plus, maybe the sequel, someone will buy the game.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think they're taking the approach of like get it in front of, and you and I've gone back and forth on social media. I would love to know the contracts because the contract numbers we tend to hear are always so low. So it's like I don't really, you think, or at least I think, that they almost take that hit and say, okay, this is more about the people seeing it, like literally just people knowing it exists, because they're going to get more players that way. So, and that's great. And maybe they can, obviously you hope they can spin that off to a sequel, making more money, or just a slow burn. I brought up Alan Wake. I mean, like games, the industry hates those. The industry doesn't want to give you money for a game that's going to take 2 years, or 2 years to start making money. But those games do exist, and they can actually become financially successful. So like I want Lost Records to do well, and I agree with you. I think they need to hook up with somebody, and I think I loved Jasant. I don't know if you did you play that game?
I've not yet, but I've heard very good things about it.
I thought, but I guess my point to kind of put the final nail. I think those types of games from them are long gone. We're never, even though Banishers, I do feel like was for a wider kind of like this discount God of War, but then heavy, super good writing. Just but I think the days of like the Jasant or Tell Me Why and Twin Mirror, I guess, are kind of more in line. But they got to go more mainstream, which and that's what I think I can appreciate about this game. Thinking about the future, where it's like they got to keep their identity, right? And that's like the scary thing, even with like a Remedy, right? They need more money. They need to make it wider appeal. But Alan Wake 2 is Alan Wake 2, like and it's Remedy, and it's like you can tell. And Lost Records is Don't Nod. So as long as they don't lose what makes them special, even if you don't like it, as long as they don't lose what actually makes them special, because they're going to need help. Like there's no, you can't really, I think, survive without the help of others, currently.
No, I completely agree with you, because it's like, we were just talking about this, like, only company that can really survive in this climate without reeling in tons of money from other people is Take-Two Interactive, because they have Grand Theft Auto coming up, and every other company has scaled so much in the cost of production of games and how much it costs. These kind of games like Lost Records are the ones that Don't Nod needs to focus on and really build on, because, as you said with Twin Mirror, Don't Nod hasn't had a major success since Life is Strange, and Vampire was a very good success, but those are the two games that always appear in the royalties, and everything since then, Harmony, Twin Mirror, Jusant, anything else, you always see it from Oscar Bear or this, even Don't Know, they keep saying it's like the climate, it's this kind of climate. The days are gone, as you said. Those days are gone. Like, even when it says, I think even in the Don't Know press release, it says like, we have like a pipeline of like production of games. It's like Koira is mentioned in there, and The Lonesome Guild. And look, they're really quite gorgeous games. I'll never knock them for that. And they're getting critical reception, but they're not needle movers. They ain't going to move Don't Nod's numbers. They ain't going to make it that. And I think they need to look at, for example, this project and see what they can do with it. Because my dream, for example, for a sequel, forget about when you said when Swan comes back and whoever else, my dream, for example, would be this project, but then it's with Deck Nine's co-development service. So Deck Nine is doing the mocap for this project, and it's running that engine. Like, that would be truly where two studios come up with the power strength, because Deck Nine's mocap is phenomenal and the full performance capture. And then you combine it with this, because like, I love the VO director of this game, Philip Baki's fantastic, but they're currently doing what they're doing with Life is Strange, which was mocap VO. And then you lose that body energy. So you can see when, for example, in the performances, Swan would say something, and then it's like, Autumn will reply, but like the two actors aren't in the same room, so the synergy isn't there. And we've moved in so much into performance capture now. It's so important. So I think like Don't Know needs to look at those options where it's like we can strengthen these kind of sectors, go with that, make these kind of games, and roll things out. And I think that's the best way to survive in this industry at the minute, because like so many studios are just going through like back and forth. I know you covered Monolith, for example, where like they shut down from Warner Bros. And it's like that's a tragedy in itself. So it's a brutal industry at the minute, and I think like we don't know, they're just looking at how to readjust, because like I think one of the articles we read on our podcast, it was like they're not projected to make earnings like profitable for 3 years, so they're not so they like basically that period from like 2020 even earlier, Don't Know has basically just R&D invested. So they've R&D invested into everything, Montreal, production lines and stuff. And they've obviously made the incentive. We're going to invest, and then we're going to produce games out, and we're going to make profit and yada, yada, yada. But it's not done that. And you have to worry, because when Don't Nod's a publicly traded company, and Tencent, for example, owns a 40% stake, what happens if Tencent pulls its money out? And it's like, we're going to sell out and getting out of here. Because Tencent has done that before with video game companies. It's like, we're out of here. So where does Don't Know go from here? So I think the options are there. And whether people like it or not, there might have to be different things. Because like, I know one developer I know who was like, for example, the industry loves horror games at the minute. They want horror games. And it's like the same with content creators and streamers. I, for example, could see Lost Records going down to a horror route in certain elements, more into that. Michel's big influence is Sam Lake as well. He loves Sam Lake games.
Sam Lake games.
Yeah. So like imagine this teetered into it during when you're in the forest and stuff. It starts going into the psychological thriller. And I think you could really reinvent the wheel with certain ways that they're doing it. So it's interesting because like we're so far gone from that other industry, like when it once was, and it's like video games are just struggling. Like, you know, you see some of the games and it's like, oh, The Last of Us is getting remastered 8 times and this game getting remastered. There's some good possibilities. I hope that the one thing that maybe would do good for this game, at least with Lost Records, is getting on Switch too. I think that would be a good idea for them.
It's always necessary. I think Switch, even putting Life is Strange Double Exposure on the base Switch and it running as awesome as it did, as we all know, I feel like that even helped. No matter how badly it can run on the Switch, that's like an extra. It's just like getting an extra million or two sales just by putting any game that you want on the Switch. No, yeah, well, hey, a great discussion. You guys let us know in the comments what you think. Future of Don't Nod, future of Lost Records. Adnan, thank you again so much, man, for joining me and talking about this yet again.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. It's always good to catch up. This was a bit more, like chill compared to Lost.
This was about hope. This is about the future, and we didn't do that last time. No, I mean, I appreciate you being here. You guys, I'll leave all of his social links, all of his the stuff that he creates, and you know, he's a go-to guy for me with all of his stuff. So I'll leave that in the description if you guys want to check it out. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all on the next one.